going to be talking about Baki, or more specifically, why it's kind of stupid. Now, the best way to describe Baki is what everybody sees when you watch Dragon Ball Z. A bunch of buff men fighting each other. Except that's literally what Baki's all about. However, Baki is not your typical shonen fighting anime. Sometimes the show goes into excruciating detail about the techniques and abilities used, and it almost makes you believe that these techniques and abilities are feasible, until Baki gets beat up by an imaginary bug. Baki is a show that is great, or at least it could have been great, if not just very entertaining, but it ended up falling short. Let's see why. The very first arc in the show is the prisoner arc. Simply put, these prisoner guys want to taste defeat, so they break out of prison simultaneously to run hands with the entire cast of the show. This arc, it has a lot of cool fights and genuinely cool moments, but it's tarnished by shit pacing. For one, Baki, the main character, does not get screen time for most of the season. The main times where he does is when Kozue is threatened, and even then, he either doesn't finish the job, and on the rare occasion that bro was actually on screen, he was getting absolutely cooked. Let me tell you that I was yelling when I wanted this guy to do something! But he does eventually get his get back. In episode 21. The biggest reason it took so long for Baki to get his shit together was because he was sidelined for most of the saga. The actual main characters of the saga were actually the side characters fighting the prisoners. Which usually, I would say it's a good thing that you're putting all this attention and detail into all these side characters, but does that have to be at the cost of Baki? Do we have to give me a grocery list of reasons to hate Baki right as the series just started? Second point, Baki would have gotten his get back way sooner if the pacing was better. For every punch, for every kick is a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation explaining why their balls expanded by 2 centimeters to give them more power. I mean, for God's sake, Retsu gets punched by a boxing glove, and his immediate reaction is to start thinking about the history, to start thinking about why it was why the punch felt so impactful. Bro could have made an entire essay about why the gentleness of the boxing glove made my brain combust. Which is a reoccurring point that he says about 3 different times in this one exposition. Because of a fucking punching glove. Now look, I can understand giving exposition like this before a fight, or if there's like some ultra specific boxing gloves that have something special about them that need to be established for the sake of the story. But when you're explaining all these random minute details in the middle of a fight, it drags the fight. It makes me infinitely pissed off. What I want to watch in this series is buff men fighting each other. I don't care about the lore. I don't care about the history lesson. If I cared about the lore, or if I cared about the history lesson, I'll be watching Indiana Jones. And the prisoner arc was the worst offense to this problem. Now, in the Simp Saga, they actually managed to fix this problem, because the majority of the exposition being told was from Ali Jr.'s perspective. But that's because majority of his exposition were just spent hyping himself up, talking about his training technique, why he thinks it's the best, and why he's definitely not going to get cooked by every single character in the saga. The prison arc and the pickle arc also have exposition which actually kind of feels relevant to the story. And if there isn't significant exposition going on, it's cut up. The fights feel snappy. Take Jack Hanma versus Pickle, for example. That fight felt very quick and snappy because we weren't constantly thinking, oh, I wonder what Jack's thinking in his brain right now as he throws this left kick and right kick and left kick and right kick. No, the most we lingered in this fight was when Jack and Pickle were giving each other the sloppy toppy. The other piece of exposition that they had in the Pickle arc was the mock punch, but that also had some relevance as well, even if it didn't even do all that much in the end. But unfortunately, this is where the good pacing comes to an end. The Baki versus Yujiro fight. The fight that was supposed to define the series, that was supposed to be the biggest fight of the entire show, the climax of the show, that was built up not just from modern Baki, but Baki the Grappler as well. To say the stakes have never been higher is not a joke. Alas, the pacing in the Baki versus Yujiro fight is ass. And it basically ruins the entire fight. Once again, we've got exposition for days after each and every punch is thrown. Various perspectives being shown that we didn't ask for. And a fucking lore dump about Yujiro's father? Because his ghost decided to show up for some reason? I've said it once and I'll say it again. I don't care about the family lore. Why is Yujiro's dad suddenly coming back from the grave to tell his son, hey, you should be kicking his ass. What are you doing, boy? Like, from having to endure the Retsu boxing arc, which I think is entirely pointless, to the exposition between Baki and Yujiro and him basically just glazing up his father every 2 seconds that they're fighting.
Oh, yes, Daddy.
And then Yujiro's grandpa just spawning from the fucking grave. I honestly lost my patience. I dropped the series after this happened. And the only reason I rewatched the series was for the sake of this video. I would not have rewatched this if it wasn't for the sake of this video. In fact, majority of the time when I'm watching any Baki related content, it's always done through YouTube clips, because YouTube clips do not include the 90 minutes of exposition that the series gives. If I went back and had to do the math on the amount of exposition that could have been cut out of the series that would have made the series probably like half the length that it is right now, then I'm damn well sure that the series would have been way more enjoyable. When the series first began, Baki spent most of his time off screen, and whenever bro was on screen, he was just getting laid out flat. However, with the power of yes time, with the power of Yujiro's fatherly advice, no seriously, you couldn't just wait until before or after to do this? This man Yujiro's a menace. Baki ends up getting his get back, but he ends up getting poisoned in this fight, which leads into the next arc where he goes into a tournament while being poisoned, until eventually he actually is able to cure the poison with the power of Retsu sugar water, which is pretty nasty, I'm not gonna lie. But at the end of it, he recovers stronger than ever and literally starts running the fade with everyone. The fight between Oliver and Pickle were some of the best fights in the entire series. Especially his fight with Pickle, where we know for a fact that he would have won if he didn't get so cocky. All this training, all this struggle, all of Baki's journey was made so he could get stronger to fight his father. And the reason he's fighting his father is because his father killed his mother. Now, we kind of just view Yujiro as like the chaos element to the series because he just kind of exists on his own plane of existence in the series. But Baki views him as the main antagonist for pretty much the entire series. When Baki is finally ready to face Yujiro, however, he just completely dismisses the original reason why he decided to fight him. He basically says that the only reason he wants to fight Yujiro is because he wants to fight Yujiro. This fight is dumbed down so much to the point where it's just a father and son scuffle on a Tuesday night to test the strength of the other person, to have a father and son playing with each other. Like, how did we go from this to this? An established motivation or a personal grudge. That has been the driving force for all of these fights in the series. That is why when the small buff kid fought Spec, a character that we hated, it was satisfying as hell. But when you have a fight like Baki versus Yujiro, where the stakes are whoever wins or loses, it doesn't really matter, makes those sudden high stakes fall really low. As a part of their exposition, they could have even dived into the fact that Baki is technically in a very abusive relationship with his father, but they don't. Instead, they decide to do a whole exposition where Baki and Yujiro are low-key becoming schizophrenic, imagining tables, imagining soup, being in perfect harmony, and Yujiro's father coming back from the dead. I'm not gonna stop bringing up that point. That was so stupid. They turned the biggest fight in this series into a father and son bonding experience. Look, I know this entire video has been spent trashing on Baki, but that's because I thought the series had legitimate potential. For a modern anime, the fights are really brutal, creative, and just straight up absurd. They managed to balance all of this while making the fights super entertaining. And whenever the animation wasn't 3D, the fights looked fantastic as well. Every fight happens for a reason, and if it doesn't happen for an explicit reason, the fights are at least really entertaining. So when we have to constantly cut away from what is actually good from the series, it just makes it feel like a total drag. The techniques and abilities in the series are really absurd and definitely would not work in real life, but that's just a part of the series not taking itself too seriously. The side characters in the show also get legitimate screen time as well, which I think is a really good thing because a lot of series often fail to capitalize on the side characters that they have to work with. They also make the side characters feel like they have actual depth. So much to the point where Baki feels like the most shallow character in the series, most notably being the Sim Saga. Now, nobody really likes Ali Jr., so having an entire arc based around him might seem like an absolute drag, but that's fine because this entire arc was just spent Ali Jr. getting his shit rocked. I mean, you'd think he would have learned from Spec that you do not fuck with Baki when he's with his girl. Yujiro, he is a fantastic antagonist / chaos element to the story. Somehow, with as absurd and crazy as Baki is, Yujiro finds a way to flip the logic in this universe on its head even more. Not to mention that him playing by his own rules and his own code just makes him just like another force of nature in this series not to be trifled with. He is an absolute menace to society, which makes him a great character to have on screen. But because he doesn't play sides or favorites, it doesn't really feel like he could just like come into a conflict at any time, any place, and just end it within a matter of seconds. Now we know he could because he's the strongest creature on Earth, but we never think that he will because he never does. Yujiro just does his own thing. He doesn't really care what happens in the main cast. Compare this to something like Dragon Ball Super, which has like Beerus and Whis just kind of standing around at all times, and they just kind of diminish the tension of the series because if shit goes to south, we know that Beerus and Whis are there to rewind the clock or fix whatever mistake Goku made. The Prison Saga, aka the fight between Baki and Oliver, was such a great fight that it made me see the show for the true potential that it had. It made me look to the future of Baki, just trying to think about how they could keep this forward momentum going, how they could keep improving on the series, and make it into a much better show. If they just fixed the pacing and exposition problem in the show, it would be 10 times better.